Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, peaceful walk through the heart of ancient Athens, long before cars, phones, and traffic lights, when sandals and sunlight ruled the streets. You'll drift through marble courtyards, past the hum of the marketplace, and up the sacred hill of the Acropolis, where gods and humans shared the same morning air. You'll feel the hush before the city wakes, the faint clink of pottery, the coo of doves on temple ledges. It's a morning you probably wouldn't survive for long if you were really there, disease, bad plumbing and all, but for tonight, you get the calm without the consequences. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love reading those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's early morning in Athens, sometime around the 5th century BCE, and you wake to the faint orange blush creeping over the Acropolis. The marble lows softly, still cool from the night. The cicadas haven't started their noisy chorus yet, and the air smells faintly of olive wood smoke from last night's hearths. You stretch, hearing the low murmur of people stirring in nearby homes. Roosters crow from the hillsides, their calls overlapping like a chaotic choir. You step outside your small stone house, and your sandals crunch on the packed earth. The streets aren't paved, just narrow paths lined with uneven walls, whitewashed but chipped, each home hugging the next. A neighbor, still half asleep, tosses a pail of water down his doorstep to clear away dust. The splash darkens the earth and momentarily cools your toes. As you look up, the Parthenon dominates the skyline. It's still new, gleaming, almost blinding when the sun hits it just right. The sculpted gods seem to wake too, light crawling across their carved robes. You can smell the faint resin from offerings burned at dawn, and somewhere higher up, a priestess murmurs prayers to Athena, patron of this proud city. You make your way slowly up the slope of the hill. There's no rush here. Athenians love a good stroll, and besides, your destination, the Agora, the beating heart of the city, won't fully wake for another hour or so. For now, it's all quiet anticipation. You pass a columned stoa, still in shadow, and a few workers sweeping away yesterday's dust. A sleepy guard nods at you from beneath his bronze helmet, more decoration than defense at this hour. There's a gentle sense of order here, even in the chaos of daily life. Athens, after all, is the experiment that invented democracy. Well, sort of. You can't help but smirk at the irony that everyone can vote as long as you're male, freeborn, and not a foreigner. Historians still argue whether that counts as true democracy. But you can forgive them their enthusiasm. They were figuring it out as they went. You pause by a well. A young woman lowers her amphora, chatting with a friend about last night's festival. You catch the word Dionysus and can almost picture the revelry: wine, dancing, and very questionable flute music. It's hard to believe that the same city that spends its mornings in quiet reverence can spend its nights in unrestrained joy. But that's Athens for you, both philosopher and party guest. As the sun lifts higher, gold creeps over rooftops and flickers on terracotta tiles. A cool breeze carries the scent of baking bread and pressed olives. You follow it down toward the lower city, passing a few wandering dogs, lazy creatures who know which baker drops the most crumbs. You reach a small courtyard where an old man tends to a pot of burning incense. He looks up, squints, and smiles without words. You nod back. In this city, gestures often say more than speech. The Athenians have a word for this kind of mutual understanding: philia, a sense of friendly goodwill that binds everyone from citizens to slaves. The streets begin to fill now. Men in light chitons stroll by, talking politics or poetry, it's hard to tell which. Children chase each other with sticks, their laughter bouncing off the walls. A donkey ambles past, loaded with amphorae, looking deeply unimpressed by the concept of civilization. Somewhere, a temple bell rings, a soft bronze tone that signals morning prayers. You pause and look back toward the Acropolis. The light has fully claimed it now. It gleams like fire on stone. A group of priests walks in solemn procession, white robes trailing dust. They carry baskets of grain and small jugs of oil, offerings to Athena, whose wisdom they hope will bless another day of civic squabbles and artistic breakthroughs. You can't help but think how everything here seems both ordinary and divine. The gods aren't distant figures. They live among the people, perched on hills and painted on vases. Even a humble meal or a casual conversation feels somehow sacred. It's as if the Athenians built their lives on a steady hum of gratitude, mixed with a dash of self-confidence and a generous pour of drama. You reach a quiet overlook and sit on a stone bench. From here, you can see the city waking below. The Agora, the temples, the workshops, the line of ships glittering in the harbor at Piraeus far beyond. Smoke rises lazily from a dozen hearths, curling upward into the morning air. The scene feels timeless, and in a way, it is. The same sun that touches your face now touched the faces of Socrates, Pericles, and nameless artisans who built the city's bones. You pull your cloak a little tighter around you. The day will get hot soon, but for now, the morning air carries a coolness you don't want to lose. Somewhere nearby, a flute begins to play. A simple tune, maybe a prayer, maybe just practice. The notes float softly, wrapping around the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the breeze. There's a charm in this calm moment before Athens erupts into its usual noise. You know what's coming. The shouting of merchants, the debates at the assembly, the laughter from taverns. But here, at dawn, the city feels human again. Vulnerable, hopeful, almost sleepy. You brush some dust from your sandals and stand, ready to head downhill. The Agora is calling, and with it, the swirl of life that makes Athens what it is. The chatter, the trade, the philosophy, and the occasional pigeon dive-bombing your breakfast. But before you go, you take one last look at the Parthenon glowing above you. It's easy to forget that it's still new here, not yet the ruin it will become. For now, it stands perfect, proud, and whole, its marble steps unbroken, its gods still watching. You start walking, the city slowly coming alive around you. Somewhere behind, a woman calls for her son to fetch water. Ahead, a baker opens his shutters with a wooden creak. You catch the faintest whiff of warm bread again, and your stomach growls. Maybe breakfast will be your next stop. The sun has fully cleared the horizon now, and Athens is awake. The air buzzes, not with noise yet, but with promise. You take a deep breath and keep walking toward it. You follow the sloping road down from the Acropolis, and the quiet of dawn gives way to the low murmur of human life gathering its pace. The city smells richer now. Baking bread, olive oil warming in clay lamps, dust rising beneath sandals. You turn a corner, and the Agora spreads before you like a living organism stretching its limbs after sleep. This is the marketplace, yes, but also something more. It's the heart of Athenian life, where trade, politics, philosophy, and gossip all meet in a single swirl. The square opens wide under the pale morning light, framed by columned porticos and scattered shrines. The marble gleams where it's polished smooth by countless feet. The rest is still rough, still human. You pause at the edge for a moment, watching. The first merchants are already setting up. Potters stacking bowls and cups on linen mats, farmers unloading baskets of figs and olives, a few fishmongers spreading fresh catch from the coast, the smell sharp enough to clear your sinuses. One of them waves a squid like a banner, shouting something about the best in Attica. You believe him, mostly because no one else is awake enough to argue. A rooster struts by as if he owns the place, and maybe he does. You step carefully. Sandals and poultry droppings don't mix. You stroll between the stalls, letting the rhythm of Athens wash over you. There's something hypnotic about the mix of sounds. The shuffle of sandals, the jingle of coins, the rise and fall of conversation in melodic Greek. A merchant with a face like sun-dried leather greets you with a practiced grin. "Olives from my own grove," he says, gesturing proudly to a heap so glossy they look painted. You take one, roll it between your fingers, and nod politely. Behind him, a woman sells dyed fabrics, squares of deep crimson and sea green fluttering in the breeze. The dyes come from far-off places. Tyrian purple squeezed from tiny sea snails. Egyptian blues carried by traders who smell like the desert itself. The colors seem to pulse with the promise of faraway worlds. You notice a small knot of men gathered near a column. They're not buying or selling. They're talking, animatedly, hands slicing the air. You recognize the look. Philosophers at work, or perhaps just men with too much free time. One gestures toward the heavens, another toward the ground, and you catch phrases about truth, virtue, and whether fish can think. You can't help but smile. Historians still argue whether Socrates ever really came here to torment passersby with questions, but you can easily imagine it. The soft voice, the infuriating patience, the glint of humor in his eyes. A skinny youth nearby balances a tray of honey cakes, his voice breaking as he sings out his price. "You buy one for a few obols. It's still warm, sticky, the sweetness cutting through the salty air of the fish stalls." You lean against a column and watch the crowd grow thicker. The city is awake now, alive in all its noisy, dusty, beautiful imperfection. A group of medics, foreign residents, pass by with cautious glances. They're allowed to live here, even prosper, but not to vote. You can sense their mix of pride and quiet distance. They belong, but not completely. One of them, a potter from Corinth, carries a jar painted with a scene of a satyr chasing a nymph. You try not to laugh. Apparently, art history has always had its moments of questionable taste. A loud voice cuts through the chatter, an official calling out decrees from a wooden platform. News travels here by human lungs, announcements of new taxes, festival dates, and military postings. People stop to listen, pretending not to care while caring deeply. You catch a phrase about Sparta, and the crowd murmurs. Even now, peace feels like a thing borrowed, not owned. Still, no one seems particularly alarmed. Athenians are experts at living beneath a cloud of almost. You walk toward the Stoa of Attilas, its long colonnade offering shade from the sun now climbing higher. Craftsmen sit in the cool shadow, repairing sandals, sharpening tools, or carving tiny wooden figurines of gods. One of them, a gray-bearded man with sawdust in his hair, holds up a half-finished statue of Athena. "Too serious?" he asks no one in particular. You tell him she looks perfect, divine but approachable. He chuckles, "Just like my wife." You both laugh quietly, and the sound fades into the hum of the crowd. At a nearby stall, a woman sells tiny clay lamps. Some are plain, others shaped like owls or dolphins. You pick one up, feeling its smoothness. The seller tells you it's made with local clay from Kerameikos, famous across Greece for its fine texture. "It breathes like skin," she says proudly. You buy it, not because you need it, but because the idea of light that breathes feels right for this city. Across the way, a priest in white robes passes slowly, collecting offerings for the small shrine of Hermes, god of trade. People drop coins, bits of fruit, even small loaves of bread. You notice one merchant slip in a few extra coins with an exaggerated sigh, insurance perhaps, against the whims of fortune. Historians still debate whether religion here was truly devout or more transactional, but standing in the middle of this lively crowd, it's clear that both coexist easily. Faith and business shake hands every morning in the Agora. You find a quiet spot near a low wall and sit for a moment, chewing the last crumbs of your honey cake. A child chases a hoop across the square, a dog barks, someone sneezes violently and immediately blames the gods. You grin. Some things never change. You glance toward a group of older men seated under a portico. Their cloaks are fine, their sandals new, and their expressions practiced. They're the politicians, citizens who spend their days talking about justice, order, and whether the new drainage system should go left or right. One of them catches your eye briefly, and you feel that unmistakable Athenian mix of charm and arrogance radiate from him like heat. You can almost hear him saying, "Of course, we invented civilization." A hawker interrupts your thoughts, thrusting a basket of fresh figs under your nose. You buy one just to make him happy. The fruit bursts sweetly between your teeth, sticky and fragrant. You watch the juice run down your hand and think that even in all their seriousness, Athenians must have understood the small joys of being alive. The Agora grows louder, a donkey brays, someone drops a jar. The air fills with the rhythmic clatter of daily life. And yet, beneath the bustle, there's still a kind of rhythm, a civic heartbeat that never really stops. Somewhere, a man with a lyre begins to play a tune. The melody winds through the noise like a thread of calm. You close your eyes briefly, letting it carry you. The sound is ancient but familiar. It feels like the same tune you might hear drifting from an open cafe window today. Proof that music has always been humanity's way of surviving the chaos. You open your eyes again to find the Agora in full bloom. The sunlight glints off bronze shields hanging in a smith's stall. Pigeons peck crumbs near a statue of Hermes, unfazed by human activity. You can almost see the invisible lines that tie this place together. The trade routes, the philosophies, the arguments that will echo for centuries. Athens, for all its flaws and contradictions, is a living experiment. Here, people talk themselves into progress and sometimes right back out again. You wonder if anyone then realized how much their ideas would outlive them. Probably not. They were too busy arguing over whose goat ate whose vine. As the day edges toward mid-morning, you rise and dust off your cloak. The Agora hums behind you like a living thing. You take one last look back at the sea of faces, the glint of coins, the haze of sunlight, and think, this is what civilization feels like when it's still new. You turn toward a narrow side street where the smell of baking bread and warm cheese drifts temptingly. Time for breakfast. And maybe, if you're lucky, a good story from whoever's sitting next to you. You follow your nose down a sunlit side street, leaving behind the chorus of voices in the Agora. The hum fades, replaced by the soft scrape of sandals and the cooing of pigeons nesting in the eaves above. The air here smells heavenly. Fresh bread cooling on open racks, honey drizzling onto warm flat cakes, and something faintly nutty that might be sesame or roasted barley. Athens may be famous for philosophy and democracy, but this morning it's breakfast that deserves the laurels. You pause at a small bakery, a humble clay-walled shop with a half door open to the street. Inside, a baker works bare-chested, sweat shining on his shoulders as he kneads dough with steady, rhythmic motions. His apprentice, a boy barely taller than the counter, scurries about, dusting flour like a miniature storm cloud. The baker catches your eye and grins. "Kalimera, friend, you look hungry." He's right, of course. He breaks off a piece of crusty bread, steam curling from the middle, and hands it to you with a pinch of salt and a drizzle of oil. You bite in, and the flavor is perfect. Simple, clean, earthy. He laughs softly. That's the taste of life here. Nothing fancy, just grain, sun, and patience. He's not wrong. Bread is the backbone of Athenian life. It's made from barley more often than wheat. Tougher stuff, less elegant, but reliable. The wealthier citizens might enjoy finer loaves, maybe baked with honey or sprinkled with poppy seeds. The poorer folks? Crusts dipped in wine or water, softened enough to chew. You tear another bite and wonder how many hands throughout the city are breaking bread at this exact moment. Across the street, a woman sells figs and dates from a woven basket. You buy a small handful. The figs are tender, their skins split from the heat, the insides glowing a soft amber. You pop one in your mouth and savor the sweetness, sunlight turned edible. She smiles knowingly. "Best from Attica," she says. "You can't find them like this in Sparta." You chuckle. The quiet rivalry between the two cities even seeps into fruit sales. You wander a bit farther, finding a shaded courtyard where a few people sit sharing breakfast. There's a man in a faded cloak reciting verses from memory. something lyrical about the sea and longing. A woman nearby rolls her eyes. He's been performing that same bit since the last festival, she mutters. You hide your smile behind a sip of watered wine someone's handed you. Athenians rarely drink it straight. Even the gods might frown at that. The wine is light, diluted 3 parts water, 1 part grape. Just enough to give it flavor, not enough to cloud the mind. You can see why it's a daily ritual. It's not about intoxication, but balance. Still, as you watch a few men debating loudly about who owes whom a chicken, you suspect not everyone respects that balance perfectly. Breakfast here isn't grand, but it's communal. Everyone eats in sight of everyone else. The air is full of conversation, half gossip, half philosophy, and occasionally both at once. A man nearby argues that the moon must be a goddess, not a rock. His friend insists it's clearly an eye belonging to some enormous celestial being. Historians still argue whether they really believed such things, you think, watching them wave their bread like swords, or if they just like the sound of their own ideas. A lazy dog flops beside you, clearly well-versed in this morning routine. You drop him a crumb and he rewards you with a wag and an expression that says, "Finally, someone who understands diplomacy." From the corner of your eye, you notice a small shrine tucked against a wall, a humble offering spot for Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Someone has left a few olive branches and a tiny cup of milk. The flame flickers faintly, despite the breeze. It's a reminder that even breakfast, here, begins with gratitude. The Athenians know how fragile comfort is, how easily fortune shifts. A passerby stops to adjust the flame, muttering a quick blessing. You can't help but appreciate how seamlessly the sacred blends into the ordinary here. No one makes a show of it. It's just what people do. A quiet rhythm of reverence woven into the fabric of daily life. You lean back on the low wall and watch the sunlight creep higher. The city hums more now, footsteps echoing, voices rising. Somewhere nearby, a lyre player begins tuning his strings, the notes tentative and bright. The baker's apprentice rushes past again, balancing a tray of small round loaves. One slips, bouncing across the street. He groans, and a passing philosopher bends down to pick it up, brushing off the dust. Even bread seeks wisdom, the philosopher says solemnly, handing it back. The boy blinks, unsure if he's being teased. You nearly choke on your fig, trying not to laugh. You decide to walk while you finish your meal, nibbling on a crust and another fig as you go. The streets twist and narrow, opening suddenly into small courtyards or shaded stoas. Every turn seems to reveal something new. A cluster of women chatting while spinning wool, a stray cat stalking a pigeon with all the seriousness of a military campaign, a boy carving a tiny ship into a bit of wood. You pass a stall selling olive oil, the pride of Attica. The merchant calls out that his is pressed from the sacred groves near Athens itself. Fit for Athena's own table, he declares, though you doubt the goddess shop's retail. Still, the oil gleams golden in the light, and the scent is intoxicating, sharp, clean, alive. You dip a finger and taste. Smooth, with just the right bite of bitterness. It's easy to see why this simple liquid fuels nearly every part of life here. Cooking, lamps, cleaning, even ritual. Athenian skin practically glows from it. One elderly woman nearby dips her hands in a small bowl of the oil and smooths it through her hair. For shine, she says, winking at you, and maybe for luck. You think of the jars of modern conditioner lined up in supermarkets and realize that not much has changed in spirit, just the packaging. You take a few more steps and stumble on a small commotion. A group of men is arguing over the price of cheese, sharp goat's milk cheese from the hills outside the city. The seller swears by its quality, insisting it was blessed by a priest of Hermes. Hermes doesn't bless cheese, one customer protests. He blesses profit. The argument spirals. Eventually, they settle the matter the old-fashioned way. Whoever shouts longest wins. You quietly buy a slice from the exhausted seller, who gives you a look that says, "Take it and run before they start again." The cheese is creamy, salty, and tangy all at once. You eat it with the last of your bread, feeling absurdly content. As the morning sun climbs higher, you find a patch of shade beside a wall draped with grapevines. Children's laughter rings out as they chase each other through the street, their sandals slapping against the dust. A woman leans from a window above, scolding them affectionately in that universal tone known to mothers across time. You think again about how ordinary and extraordinary this all feels. The Athenians, for all their grand achievements, architecture, art, democracy, are just people starting their day with bread, gossip, and mild arguments about dairy products. There's comfort in that. Civilization, you realize, isn't built in grand moments, but in countless small ones like these. As you stand to leave, a passing man carrying a bundle of scrolls greets you politely. "Off to the Lyceum," he says. "Aristotle's lecture this morning." You raise your brows, intrigued. The Lyceum, a place of learning shaded by trees, where people discuss the nature of everything from stars to morality. You make a mental note to wander there later. For now, your stomach is happy, your heart is calm, and the world feels generous. The city hums around you, warm and alive. You brush a crumb from your tunic and take one last sip of wine. The baker waves at you from down the street. The air smells faintly of figs and dust and promise. You smile, stretch, and step back toward the sunlit main road. Next stop, perhaps somewhere quieter, a workshop maybe. A place where stone, wood, and imagination meet. Somewhere that hums with creativity rather than conversation. Athens has plenty of both. The street narrows again as you leave behind the scent of breakfast and follow the rhythmic clack of chisels striking stone. The sound is steady, deliberate, almost musical. It draws you like a heartbeat through the dust and heat. Soon, the air changes, the faint sweetness of figs replaced by the dry, powdery tang of marble dust. You've reached the sculptor's quarter, where Athens turns rock into beauty and dust into immortality. You duck beneath a low lintel and step into a workshop. It's cool inside, shaded from the harsh Aegean sun by woven mats hung across the entry. The space smells faintly of limestone and olive oil, with undertones of sweat and patience. A sculptor stands before a tall block of marble, his back straight, his arm rising and falling in a slow rhythm. Each strike releases a tiny puff of white dust that floats lazily through a shaft of sunlight, catching in his beard and hair until he looks half divine himself. He doesn't look up, but he speaks, voice calm and measured. Don't startle the stone. It listens before it reveals itself. You freeze mid-step, unsure if he's joking or genuinely conversing with the rock. It's Athens. Either is possible. He glances over his shoulder, smiling faintly. You can come closer, just don't sneeze. Dust is jealous. It wants all the attention. You grin and step closer. Around him, unfinished works line the walls. Torsos without arms, faces half-formed, a lion crouching eternally mid-prowl. The tools, chisels, hammers, rasps, are scattered across benches. Each bears the polish of years. You notice a small bowl of olive oil nearby. He dips his fingers in it occasionally, rubbing the handle of his chisel to keep the wood from drying. He gestures toward the tall block he's working on. "Pentelic marble," he says with quiet reverence, "from the mountains north of here. The same kind used for the Parthenon." His tone suggests he's talking about sacred relics, not geology. If you work it right, it glows even at night. They say the stone remembers the moon. You nod, not entirely sure if he's serious, but you can almost see it, the faint sheen of marble and moonlight, like frozen light. He goes back to work, tapping carefully. "This one will be Hermes," he explains, "for the Potter's Guild down the hill. They want him smiling this time. Apparently last year's version looked too judgmental." You stifle a laugh. Even gods have PR problems, huh? He chuckles, the sound mingling with the chisel's rhythm. Of course, a god's expression can ruin a business. A frown from Hermes, and suddenly no one's shipments arrive on time. As he works, a young apprentice sweeps marble dust into a neat pile. "We use it for plaster," the boy explains proudly. "Nothing wasted here. Even mistakes become walls." That line sticks with you. Mistakes become walls. There's a quiet wisdom in it, the kind only people who work with their hands seem to know. You watch for a while, hypnotized by the sculptor's precision. He doesn't rush. Each strike is a conversation between tool and stone. You ask how he knows when to stop carving. He pauses, smiling slightly. When it breathes. Outside, you can hear the distant noise of the Agora, voices rising, carts creaking. But in here, time feels slower, suspended. You can almost believe that art itself has its own heartbeat. The sculptor pauses for a sip of water, wiping his brow with a linen cloth. "You know," he says, "people always think we create beauty. But truthfully, the stone already holds it. We just help it escape." You nod thoughtfully. He seems more philosopher than craftsman. Maybe, in Athens, those two roles are the same thing. Historians still argue whether sculptors here were considered true artists or just skilled laborers. But standing in this workshop, surrounded by dust that glows like morning mist, it's clear they were both, technicians and dreamers, working with eternity under their fingernails. He gestures toward a smaller figure on the floor, a nearly finished bust of a young woman, serene and distant. "That's based on my wife," he admits. "She hates sitting for it. Says the marble gets more attention than she does." You can't help but smile. Does it? He shrugs. Depends on the day. There's laughter from the courtyard outside, a group of apprentices dragging in a new block of stone, their tunics covered in dust, their expressions equal parts exhaustion and pride. One of them grumbles about the weight. Another jokes that the gods should have invented something lighter, like wooden statues. "They did," the master calls back dryly. "They just didn't last." The boys laugh, and one mutters, "Neither will my back." You step outside to give them space. The courtyard is bright and loud. The clatter of tools, the shout of orders, the scrape of stone on wood as new pieces are set up for carving. Chips of marble scatter across the ground like sea foam. A stray cat pads between them, tail high, confident as any goddess. You wander to a nearby workshop where another artisan paints the finishing touches on a bronze statue. He uses a small brush and dark wax to bring out the shadows in the folds of the figure's robe. Makes it more lifelike, he explains. Otherwise, they just look like ghosts. You ask about the process, and he gestures toward a furnace in the corner, flames licking upward. "We cast the bronze in clay molds. Pour it in, let it cool, then pray it doesn't crack. Sometimes it does anyway." He shrugs, unbothered. The gods decide which statues they like. A little further down the street, another workshop crafts small terracotta figurines, cheap offerings for temples, household shrines, or just lucky charms. You pick one up, a miniature Athena with owl eyes and a slightly crooked nose. The seller grins. "She's modestly priced," he says. "Wisdom should be affordable." You buy it, partly for the joke, partly because it feels right to carry a bit of Athens with you. The air grows hazier as more artisans light their fires. Sparks leap, metal sings, and for a moment you realize that this neighborhood, noisy, dusty, chaotic, is where the physical Athens is born. Every column, every statue, every decorative relief begins in a place like this, carved by calloused hands that few will ever remember. You lean against a post, watching sunlight flash off bronze and marble alike. The sculptor from earlier joins you, stretching his arms. "Do you ever get tired of it?" you ask. He shakes his head slowly. "No. The gods always need new faces, and men always need to believe someone's watching over them." He looks at you for a moment, then adds, "Besides, even if no one remembers our names, our work will stand long after we're gone." He wipes his dusty hands on his apron and smiles faintly. "At least until someone knocks it over." You laugh softly, but there's something in his voice, a mixture of pride and resignation. It's the artist's quiet acceptance that beauty and impermanence share the same house. A breeze stirs the air, carrying away a swirl of marble dust that catches the sunlight like drifting snow. You watch it rise and scatter, thinking how it will settle again somewhere, on temple steps, on olive leaves, maybe even on someone's breakfast bread. In Athens, even dust tells a story. You thank the sculptor and step back into the street. The noise fades behind you, replaced once again by the hum of city life. Ahead lies a grove of olive trees, their silver leaves flickering in the wind. You can see a small group gathered beneath them, sitting cross-legged in the shade. The faint sound of debate drifts your way, measured, thoughtful, and occasionally interrupted by the sound of laughter. Another corner of Athens calls, a quieter one, where wisdom grows as patiently as marble is carved. You follow the dusty path away from the sculptor's quarter, and soon the sharp ring of hammer and chisel fades into a softer rhythm, the rustle of olive leaves brushing together in the breeze. The city's clamor melts into background hum, distant and almost unreal. The grove feels cooler, shaded by ancient trunks whose twisted roots seem to whisper of centuries. The ground is carpeted with dry leaves and pale dust, and here and there sunlight filters through in warm, dappled patterns. A low murmur of voices, measured and deliberate, punctuated by the occasional pause, a thoughtful silence between questions. This is the famous Athenian classroom, though it bears no resemblance to a modern one. There are no walls, no benches, no tablets. Just a ring of students seated cross-legged on the earth, and, at their center, a man who speaks with unhurried ease, his words carried by the breeze. He's not dressed like a teacher in the way you might imagine. His tunic is simple, a little dusty. He gestures as he talks, not dramatically, but precisely, as if sculpting thoughts in the air. The students are mostly young men, though a few older ones sit quietly at the back. Merchants, soldiers, perhaps even visiting travelers who've stopped to listen. The conversation is open to all. You take a seat beneath a nearby olive tree, feeling the rough bark at your back. The group hardly notices you. They're deep in discussion about virtue, what it is, how one recognizes it, whether it can be taught. One of the students, a confident young man with an impatient tone, speaks first. "Surely virtue is simple," he insists. "It's just doing what is right." The teacher tilts his head slightly, smiling. "And what is right, my friend?" The student frowns, as if caught off guard. "Well, what the gods approve, of course." The teacher's eyes gleam. "Ah, and do the gods all approve of the same things?" Laughter ripples through the group. The young man blushes, but even he smiles. The teacher's questions aren't mocking, they're gentle nudges, designed to loosen the certainty in their minds. You realize that this is not a lecture, but a conversation, the kind Athens is famous for. The teacher doesn't proclaim, he invites. Every answer opens another question. Truth, it seems, isn't handed out, it's uncovered slowly, like an archaeologist brushing away layers of dust. The teacher rises to his feet, pacing slowly. "When you were boys," he says, "you were taught to read and write, to wrestle and recite Homer. But now you are men, and you must learn to reason. Because what good is reading if you never question what's written? What good is strength if it serves no wisdom?" He stops beside a young student who's been silent so far. "Tell me, what is wisdom?" The boy hesitates. "To know many things," he says finally. The teacher shakes his head gently. No, that is knowledge. Wisdom is knowing what to do with what you know." A murmur of agreement passes through the group. Someone jots the phrase onto a wax tablet, scratching it carefully with a stylus. You lean back and let the sound of discussion wash over you. The air smells of crushed olives and warm dust. Bees drift lazily among the blossoms. From somewhere farther down the hill, you can hear the faint sound of a flute being played, slow, wandering notes that fit the mood perfectly. A few children run by, laughing, chasing a stray dog through the grove. The teacher watches them for a moment, smiling faintly, then turns back to his students. "Do you see? They chase what amuses them. We adults are no different, only our toys are bigger. The students chuckle softly. You get the feeling this teacher uses humor the way a potter uses water, to soften, to shape. One of the older men asks a question about justice, and the conversation drifts toward the city's laws. The teacher listens intently, nodding. Athens has many laws, he says finally, but tell me, does law make a man just? The group falls quiet. A cicada hums somewhere above you. Finally, one voice answers, hesitant. Perhaps it restrains those who would not be just otherwise. The teacher nods approvingly. A good answer. The law, you see, can prevent wrongdoing, but it cannot create goodness. The law is a fence. Virtue is a garden. The students murmur their agreement. The air around them feels calm but alive, ideas weaving and branching like the trees themselves. As the discussion continues, you notice that there are no scrolls or notes, no written lessons to memorize. Everything is spoken, repeated, questioned, absorbed. Learning here isn't about collecting facts, it's about learning to think. And it happens not in silence, but in dialogue, in the spaces between question and response. After a while, the teacher sits down again, leaning back against a root. The conversation drifts to more personal matters: how to live, how to find peace, what happiness truly means. Someone mentions wealth, another mentions honor. The teacher listens, eyes half closed, then says quietly, "Wealth feeds the stomach, but virtue feeds the soul. One disappears at night, the other travels with you forever." You feel the truth of that in your chest, the way quiet wisdom always lands, soft but deep. A cool breeze stirs the leaves overhead, scattering small shadows over the students' faces. For a while, no one speaks. The stillness feels deliberate, not awkward, a moment of collective reflection. When the discussion resumes, it turns lighter. One of the apprentices jokes that perhaps the gods themselves attend these lessons invisibly. The teacher laughs. If they do, I hope they're patient. Mortals are slow learners. You smile. The tone here is warm, communal. It's not a place of hierarchy, but of shared curiosity. Every person, from the youngest to the eldest, contributes. Even disagreement is gentle, a dance, not a fight. As the sun climbs higher, the shadows shorten. A few of the students begin to yawn, stretching their legs. The teacher notices and laughs softly. Enough for today. Philosophy, like wine, should not be drunk all at once. He stands, brushing dust from his tunic. The group begins to disperse, some heading back toward the Agora, others lingering to chat or refill their water jars. You stay a moment longer, watching the teacher pack away a small clay cup and a bundle of fig leaves. You approach him, and he greets you with a nod. His eyes are bright, kind, slightly amused, as though he's already guessed every question you might ask. "Do you teach every day?" you ask. "Most days," he replies. "As long as someone wants to learn, or argue," he smiles. "Here, everyone is both student and teacher, even the trees, if you listen closely." He gestures to the grove around you. "These olive trees are older than our grandfathers' grandfathers. They have seen wars, poets, kings, fools, yet they stand, patient and quiet. Perhaps that's the first lesson, to be steady, even when the world is loud." You thank him, and he bows slightly before turning away, his figure blending into the dappled shade. The cicadas buzz again. A breeze carries the smell of crushed leaves and earth. You rise, brushing the dust from your clothes, and look toward the city. The rooftops shimmer in the midday light. Somewhere beyond those olive trees, life goes on. Markets, workshops, laughter, trade. But here, among roots and questions, Athens has shown you another side of itself. The city not just of stone and power, but of thought. As you step back onto the path, you glance once more at the grove. A few students still linger, their heads bent in quiet debate. You can't hear their words, but you know the rhythm, the back and forth of curiosity, the calm unfolding of wisdom. It's easy to see why travelers come from far away to sit here. why they leave not just with knowledge, but with something gentler, a sense of stillness, a way of seeing the world that's both simple and profound. You walk on, the leaves whispering overhead. The dust clings to your sandals, warm underfoot. The lesson lingers, quiet, steady, like the trees themselves. And somewhere behind you, the voice of the teacher rises again, soft but clear. Remember, truth does not shout, it listens. You wander away from the olive grove, the hum of philosophical chatter fading into the distance. The narrow street ahead feels quieter, lined with simple whitewashed walls and latticed windows. Somewhere inside, a loom creaks rhythmically, and a faint sound of laughter drifts out. You follow it until you come to a small courtyard half hidden behind an open doorway. The sunlight spills in like liquid gold, lighting up the clay floor and the vines curling along the walls. Inside, 3 women sit in a circle, their tunics pale and loose, hair tied back with ribbons. One hums softly as her hands work a spindle, twisting wool into thread. Another kneels beside a stone basin, washing grain in slow, practiced motions. The third glances up when she notices you, a brief smile, cautious but kind. You step inside quietly, greeted by the scent of baking bread and crushed olives. The courtyard is the heart of this house, private but alive. Chickens peck near a corner, a cat lazes on a wall, and a clay jar cools in the shade, droplets glistening on its surface. You can hear the faint clatter of pots from another room. Life here unfolds differently than in the Agora or the gymnasium. There are no public debates, no grand gestures, just the calm rhythm of daily survival. And yet it feels rich with quiet intelligence, a different kind of wisdom than what you found under the olive trees. The oldest woman, her hair streaked with silver, gestures for you to sit. You do, careful not to step on the scattered olives drying in the sun. She speaks gently, her words slow and measured. "The men of Athens talk loudly," she says, "but it is we who keep the city running." She grins, the kind of smile that suggests she's only half joking. As she speaks, the younger woman beside her begins grinding grain with a heavy stone, arms moving in steady circles. "It's not glamorous," she says, "but without this, even the philosophers would go hungry." You can't argue with that. The air is filled with a soothing rhythm, the scrape of stone, the hum of spinning thread, the cooing of a pigeon overhead. The whole space feels like a living metronome, keeping time for the unseen heart of Athens. A little girl darts into the courtyard, clutching a wooden doll. She giggles when the older woman ruffles her hair, then sits cross-legged on the floor, tracing patterns in the dust. "That's my granddaughter," the woman says proudly. "She already knows how to thread a needle. Her father thinks she'll grow up to be a poet." You smile. "Maybe she will." "Maybe," the woman replies with a wink, "if poets ever get paid." You chuckle softly. The conversation drifts between household gossip and bits of city news. The latest festival, the rise in olive prices, rumors that someone's cousin might have seen Pericles himself at the theater. The mood is light, warm. But then the older woman sighs. "Still," she says, "it's not always easy. We spend our lives here, behind these walls. The Agora is for men. The assembly, the courts, the gymnasium, all for men. We tend the home, and the home tends them." You sense no bitterness, only matter-of-fact acceptance, though perhaps with a quiet undercurrent of longing. The younger woman adds softly, "Sometimes I listen by the window when the men come home from the assembly. I hear them talking about justice, courage, wisdom, all the things they say make a man great. And I think, don't we have our own kinds of courage too?" Her words linger in the air like dust in sunlight. She gestures to her loom, the warp thread strung taut. "Every pattern tells a story," she says. "We weave scenes from myths or flowers or the sea, but we also weave what we feel, joy, fear, hope. It's the only way we get to speak." You lean closer, watching as she passes the shuttle back and forth, the cloth taking shape in soft, colored bands. "This one," she says quietly, "is for my brother. He's away fighting in a border skirmish near Corinth. I put his name in the pattern, hidden here." She points to a subtle line of darker thread. "He'll never know, but I do." The sound of the loom becomes hypnotic. The click, the pull, the soft brush of thread. It feels almost like breathing, steady and patient. You recall something one of the philosophers said earlier, that the soul needs balance, harmony. Watching the weaver, you realize she's achieving that in her own way, through the rhythm of her hands, through creation and repetition. The older woman begins kneading dough in a wide bowl, the air filling with the warm scent of yeast. "You're lucky you came today," she says. "There's bread baking and gossip to share." You laugh. Both sound equally nourishing. As the bread bakes, the conversation turns playful. The women tease each other about whose husband snores louder, whose cousin fainted during the last festival of Dionysus, and who's been saving her best olive oil for weeks, claiming it's for the gods. One of them grins at you. "Historians still argue whether the gods actually prefer olive oil or wine," she says mock seriously, and everyone bursts out laughing. You find yourself relaxing completely here, lulled by their warmth and wit. The sun has shifted, casting longer shadows, and a cool breeze swirls through the courtyard. The cat stretches, yawning dramatically, before slinking over to inspect the bread. When the loaf is finally done, it's round and golden. The older woman breaks it apart and hands you a piece. "Eat," she says. "No guest leaves hungry." You take a bite. The crust is crisp, the inside soft, and it tastes faintly of smoke from the clay oven. There's a sweetness in it too, honey maybe. "This bread," she says proudly, "comes from grain we ground this morning, oil from our trees, and honey from my cousin's hives. Everything here is from the earth. Athens has her temples, but this," she gestures around, "this is where the real offerings happen." You chew slowly, appreciating the simplicity. There's something deeply grounding about this place, something more human than all the marble monuments outside. As the afternoon drifts on, the women begin tidying up. The child falls asleep in the shade, her doll resting beside her. The younger woman hums again, a soft, looping tune that sounds older than any written song. Before you leave, the elder woman walks you to the gate. "Remember," she says, "the city is built from stone and marble, but it's held together by hands like ours." You nod, touched by the truth of it. As you step back into the street, the world feels brighter somehow. The clamor of Athens returns, the cries of vendors, the clatter of carts, but beneath it all, you can still hear the faint hum of that courtyard, the spinning, the weaving, the laughter. You think about how history so often forgets these moments, the quiet work that keeps a civilization breathing. The men may debate laws and write tragedies, but someone has to bake the bread, stitch the tunics, raise the children, and keep the olive oil from running out. And maybe that's what balance means in a city like Athens. Not equality, not yet, but a shared rhythm, like the counterpoint in a song. You've seen the public and the private, the spoken and the silent, the marble and the clay, and somehow they all belong to the same story. You walk on, the smell of warm bread still clinging to your clothes, and for a moment you imagine the whole city as one great courtyard, alive with conversation, labor, and the quiet heartbeat of ordinary lives. The sun has reached its confident height now, and the city hums with energy. You wander along a broad dirt road flanked by poplar trees until the faint scent of olive oil and sweat reaches your nose. Ahead, the gymnasium sprawls across the edge of the city, a mixture of shaded colonnades, open courtyards, and smooth stone floors dusted with sand. This is not a modern gym full of metal contraptions and upbeat music. It's a calm, almost sacred space, part athletic training ground, part social club, part school. The Greeks believe that the body and the mind are twins, each strengthening the other. You half expect to see a philosopher lecturing beside a man wrestling in the dust, and as it happens, you do. You step through the gate, greeted by the low murmur of conversation, the rhythmic thud of feet striking the sand, and the occasional laugh that echoes across the courtyard. To your left, a group of young men jogs in a loose circle, their skin glistening in the sunlight. To your right, two wrestlers grapple gently, their movements deliberate, almost like a dance. A boy approaches you carrying a small amphora of oil. His hair is cropped short, and his grin is quick and mischievous. "You'll need some of this," he says, holding up the jar. "Everyone does." You shake your head politely, and he shrugs, dipping 2 fingers into the jar and rubbing the oil along his arms. "It keeps the dust off," he explains, "and it makes you look heroic while you're pretending not to be exhausted." You can't help but laugh. "Does it work?" "Sometimes," he says, dashing away before you can answer. You find a shaded spot under a portico, where several older men recline on benches, watching the athletes with lazy interest. One of them nods at you and gestures toward the courtyard. "A fine day for training," he says. His voice is low, warm, and slow, like honey poured from a jar. "They say the best minds in Athens were sharpened right here, between a run and a debate." Indeed, you soon notice that many of the men in the gymnasium are not just athletes, but thinkers. A pair of them stand nearby, discussing geometry as casually as one might discuss the weather. Another group debates the nature of courage while flexing their biceps, multitasking in its most Athenian form. As you walk deeper into the complex, the architecture unfolds with quiet grandeur. The gymnasium is built around a central court, open to the sky, with a peristyle of columns enclosing it. Beyond that are small rooms, changing spaces, storerooms, even study chambers where philosophers sometimes hold lessons. The air smells faintly of olive oil, clay, and dust baked warm by the sun. Near one corner, a trainer shouts gentle corrections to a runner. "Lift your knees, not your pride," he calls out, and the watching crowd bursts into laughter. You can tell this is a place of discipline, but also camaraderie. The laughter is part of the rhythm, exercise for the spirit as much as the body. You pause to watch a group of wrestlers practice under the shade of an old plane tree. They move in slow circles, muscles taut, sand sticking to their skin. One catches his opponent in a perfect throw, both landing in the dust with a muffled thump. The victor helps the other to his feet, both smiling, both panting. There's competition here, yes, but never cruelty. A nearby spectator leans toward you. "They say wrestling is the art of controlled chaos," he whispers. "You must know your own strength and your weakness, too." You nod thoughtfully. It sounds suspiciously like a philosophical metaphor, and in Athens, that's probably not a coincidence. As the wrestlers rest, one of them picks up a sponge and begins scraping the oil and dust from his skin. Historians still argue whether that counts as cleaning or exfoliating, one man jokes nearby, earning a wave of laughter. You grin to yourself. The Athenians might not have invented comedy here, that happened in the theater, but they certainly practice it everywhere. Past the wrestling pit, a shaded colonnade leads to a long sand track used for running. 2 sprinters line up, their muscles coiled. At the signal, they explode forward, feet kicking up clouds of dust. You can almost feel the power in their strides, the determination that drives them. The spectators cheer softly, not wildly, just enough to acknowledge the beauty of the effort. At the finish line, the victor lifts his arms, breathing hard. His friend claps him on the back. "Tomorrow," the loser says, smiling, "I'll win." "Tomorrow," the winner replies, "you'll still owe me lunch." You laugh again. Even here, competition comes with warmth. You stroll further, your sandals crunching lightly against the sand. The hum of the gymnasium feels oddly soothing. The grunts, the laughter, the faint scraping of metal as someone sharpens a javelin tip. Nearby, a group of young men practices discus throwing. The discs gleam bronze in the sun, spinning through the air like slow, graceful planets. One of them lands with a solid thud near your feet, and the thrower jogs over, apologizing breathlessly. "Sorry, got distracted by philosophy again," he says sheepishly, wiping sweat from his brow. You raise an eyebrow. Philosophy? He nods earnestly. We were arguing whether beauty lies in the object or in the observer. I suppose the discus decided for me. It's hard to tell if he's joking, but in Athens, both are equally likely. As you walk on, you come to a quieter corner of the gymnasium where a small group sits beneath an olive tree. Books, well, scrolls, spread before them. Their teacher, a man in a plain tunic, traces a geometric diagram in the dust with a stick. The circle, he says softly, has no beginning and no end, like the soul's pursuit of understanding. You stand still, watching the students nod slowly, their faces calm, the lesson flowing like water. Even here, among the sweat and dust, Athens can't resist turning everything into a classroom. You settle onto a nearby bench, feeling the stone cool against your palms. For a while, you just breathe in the air, the mix of sunlight, olive oil, and effort. A few bees buzz lazily among the flowering shrubs at the edge of the courtyard. Someone is singing softly in the distance, an old training song about heroes, battles, and, oddly, figs. The gymnasium feels alive but unhurried, like the city's pulse slowed down. Every movement, every sound seems measured, balanced. Even rest here seems intentional, like part of the exercise. A breeze drifts through the columns, and you catch the faint scent of myrtle and thyme from the nearby gardens. The athletes begin to wind down, scraping their skin clean with curved strigils, chatting about the day's training and the evening's plans. One mentions going to the theater later. Another brags about an upcoming feast. You remember something one of the philosophers said earlier, that the ideal citizen must train both mind and body, because a weak body dulls thought, and a dull mind makes strength dangerous. Watching the men here, laughing, learning, helping one another, you start to understand what he meant. A young athlete sits down beside you, stretching his legs. First time in an Athenian gymnasium, he asks. You nod. It's calmer than I expected. He chuckles. Calm, yes, but serious too. You learn a lot about yourself here. Patience, control, balance. He glances toward the wrestlers. Also, humility. You share a smile. Around you, the gymnasium hums softly with life. People moving, talking, breathing in sync. The air feels thick with dust, sunlight, and something quieter. Contentment, maybe. Eventually, the trainer claps his hands. Enough for today, he calls out. The athletes begin to gather their things. Some linger to chat, others head toward the baths. You rise, brushing sand from your feet. As you leave the gymnasium, you look back once. The light falls across the colonnade, casting long golden stripes across the ground. For a moment, the whole scene seems timeless. Bodies in motion, minds at work, laughter drifting through the air. It strikes you that in Athens, even sweating under the sun becomes an act of culture, an offering to balance itself. You step back onto the road, your mind and body both feeling just a little lighter. The afternoon sun softens as you make your way up a winding stone path toward the sacred heart of the city. The air here smells faintly of smoke, olive oil, and wild thyme. A few cicadas still sing lazily in the heat, their droning hum mingling with the slow toll of a bronze bell somewhere ahead. The noise of the marketplace has faded behind you, replaced by a quieter kind of energy, the reverent shuffle of sandaled feet, the murmured prayers of passers-by, the faint clink of small coins offered into clay bowls. You are entering the realm of the gods now, where marble and incense mark the divide between mortal worry and divine patience. Before long, the path opens up into a sunlit courtyard framed by tall white columns. At its center rises a small temple dedicated to Athena Polios, the city's guardian. Her name means of the city, and truly, she seems to dwell everywhere here, in the olive trees, the shields, the coins, and the calm reason that Athenians so often boast about, even if they don't always practice it. The temple glows pale gold in the sunlight, its steps worn smooth by centuries of devotion. A priest in a linen robe tends a small fire on a stone altar, his movements slow and rhythmic. Beside him, a young acolyte carries a basket of barley and dried flowers, sprinkling them over the flames. The smoke rises in pale, twisting ribbons, carrying with it the scent of resin and cedar wood. You stand back for a moment, watching the small procession of worshippers approach. Some carry jars of oil, others bring simple cakes or handfuls of olives. One woman kneels to place a wreath of laurel leaves on the steps. She whispers something you can't quite catch, perhaps a prayer for health or safety, or the endurance to get through another season of family dinners. The priest notices you and nods in greeting. "You come to offer?" he asks gently. "Only curiosity," you say. "Ah," he smiles, "that is the first offering of all." You approach the altar slowly, taking in every detail. The columns are carved with scenes of Athena's triumph over Poseidon for the city's favor, his gift of a salt spring versus her olive tree. The myth goes that the Athenians chose the olive, preferring wisdom and peace over war and glory. "A good story," the priest says when you mention it, though historians still argue whether it was really about olives or politics. You laugh softly. "In Athens, isn't everything about politics?" He grins. "Perhaps that's why the gods get so many headaches." He gestures toward the temple door, where a massive bronze statue of Athena gleams faintly in the shadowed interior. "Would you like to step inside?" You nod, following him into the cool dimness. The air smells of smoke and stone. Inside, shafts of sunlight filter down through narrow slits in the ceiling, catching in the golden dust that drifts lazily through the air. Athena stands tall at the far end, her bronze armor shimmering faintly. She holds a spear in one hand, a small figure of Nike, the spirit of victory, in the other. Her expression is calm, watchful, wise. You can feel the quiet power of her presence even in the still air. People move carefully around her, laying small offerings at her feet, a bowl of honey, a folded strip of linen, a child's carved wooden toy. It's not the grandeur that impresses you, it's the tenderness. Every gift feels personal, a thread in the tapestry of belief that ties the city to its goddess. The priest kneels beside the altar and begins to murmur a prayer. His voice is low and steady, rising and falling like waves. "Athena, of the bright eyes, protector of the polis, bless those who labor and those who learn, those who fight and those who rest." You stand silently, letting the words wash over you. There's a rhythm to them, measured, soothing, timeless. Even if you don't speak every word, the meaning hums beneath the surface like the note of a lyre string. When the prayer ends, the priest offers you a small branch of olive leaves. "For protection," he says, "or for decoration. The gods don't mind either way." You take it gratefully, tucking it into your belt. Outside again, the sunlight seems warmer, the air fresher. The courtyard is fuller now. Vendors selling incense sticks and clay figurines, beggars murmuring blessings, pilgrims chatting quietly over shared bread. Religion here is not confined to walls, it breathes in every open space. You wander toward a smaller shrine tucked beneath an olive tree. This one is dedicated to Hermes, the fleet-footed trickster. His statue is modest, a slender figure in motion, winged sandals frozen mid-step. A merchant stands before him, pouring a thin stream of oil from a jug onto the stone base. "For good luck in trade," the merchant explains when he catches your eye. "Hermes appreciates efficiency. I keep my prayers brief." You smile. "Does it work?" He shrugs. "Sometimes. But even when it doesn't, it feels polite to keep him in the loop." Behind you, a woman tosses a handful of barley over her shoulder toward a small statue of Demeter, murmuring a wish for fertile fields. Another traveler touches a charm to his lips and hangs it from a branch of the sacred olive tree. The leaves rustle as if in reply. You begin to understand that worship here isn't just ritual, it's relationship. Every god, every gesture, every burnt grain of incense weaves people into a larger story, a network of gratitude, hope, and, occasionally, negotiation. The priest from before joins you again, carrying a shallow bowl of water. He dips his fingers in and sprinkles a few drops toward the altar. For cleansing, he explains, for balance. He glances up at the sky. It's a good day. The gods are quiet. You raise an eyebrow. Quiet is good? He smiles. Oh yes, it means they're content or distracted. Either way, it's peaceful. You sit on a nearby step, watching the scene unfold. A small boy is helping his mother light a lamp, concentrating hard as she guides his hand. The flame flickers, catching the gold leaf of the temple facade. A breeze carries the faint sound of a lyre from somewhere farther down the hill. There's a kind of harmony here, a shared understanding that the divine doesn't need grandeur, it needs attention. To notice the light, to offer a moment, a word, a bit of yourself. You think about the other places you've seen today, the busy Agora, the sculptor's studio, the women's courtyard, and realize that they all echo this same pattern. Each is a kind of offering, trade, art, care, thought. The divine, it seems, is not somewhere far away, but woven into the rhythm of living itself. A group of travelers arrives, dusty from the road. They approach the priest with a goat in tow, a small white creature bleating softly. The priest inspects it, murmuring a short prayer. A bowl of grain is placed beside the animal, and for a moment, everything is still. The people, the smoke, the air. Then, instead of a sacrifice, the priest releases the goat. It bounds down the hill, free, the crowd murmuring approval. The priest turns back, smiling faintly. We let it live, he says. The goddess prefers mercy today. You can't help but feel a strange lightness in your chest as the animal disappears into the olive groves below. Perhaps mercy, too, is a kind of offering. The sun begins to dip lower, painting the marble steps in shades of amber. Worshippers start to drift away, their prayers spoken, their hearts lighter. The priest gives you a small nod of farewell. May your path stay clear, he says. As you walk back down the slope, the olive branch brushing gently against your hip, you glance back at the temple. Its silhouette glows in the fading light, columns standing like patient sentinels against the sky. Athens is still bustling somewhere beyond, the cries of vendors, the clang of metal, the chatter of thinkers. But up here, the gods have the last word. And sometimes that word is silence. By late afternoon, the air in Athens feels thicker, golden with heat and dust. You follow the scent of clay and smoke as it curls through the narrow back streets, past half-built walls and sunbathing cats, until you reach the Keramikos, the potter's quarter. It's a lively place, somewhere between a neighborhood and a perpetual art studio. Every surface seems to be in motion, wheels spinning, hands shaping, fires breathing. The road here isn't paved like the grand walkways leading to temples. It's packed earth, uneven and cracked, with streaks of dried mud from yesterday's rain. Children dart between workshops carrying baskets of shards and tools. From inside one of the small square buildings, you hear the steady rhythm of a foot-powered wheel. Thump, whir, thump, like the slow heartbeat of the city itself. You step into the shade of an open workshop. Inside, the air smells like wet earth and smoke, thick with the faint metallic tang of pigments and glazes. A potter sits hunched over his wheel, bare-chested, streaked with clay, his hands coaxing life out of a spinning lump of earth. He looks up briefly and grins. Don't step too close unless you want to become art, he jokes. You smile, leaning against the doorway. I'll risk it. He chuckles and nods toward a half-finished amphora on the shelf behind him. That one's going to Sparta. They break 'em faster than we can make 'em. You glance around. Every shelf is packed with works in progress. Cups, jars, bowls, plates, all glowing softly in shades of terracotta and black. Some pieces are smooth and plain, others etched with intricate figures, athletes running, gods feasting, ships sailing across stylized waves. The detail is astonishing, even before the firing transforms them. Beautiful, you say quietly. The potter shrugs modestly. It's just dirt and sweat, but sometimes the dirt listens. He dips his fingers into a bowl of water and traces a line around the lip of the vase, steady and deliberate. You know, most people think these black figure scenes are painted with black paint, he says, but it's really just the same clay, treated differently, fired in 3 stages: oxidizing, reducing, reoxidizing. The gods may get temples, but potters get chemistry. You nod, impressed. Historians still argue whether it was discovered by accident or genius, you remark. He grins, a flash of teeth through clay dust. Probably both. Most progress starts with a broken pot and someone too stubborn to quit. Behind him, a young apprentice tends to a kiln, its mouth glowing orange like a captured sunset. He's fanning the flames with a broad reed, sweat trickling down his temples. You can feel the heat radiating even from several paces away. Each kiln load takes hours of careful attention. Too little air and the clay weakens, too much and it cracks. Every piece has a soul, the potter says, watching the fire. Sometimes you lose one in the flames. Sometimes it comes out better than you imagined. He wipes his brow with his forearm, leaving a streak of ochre. A bit like people, really. Outside, the narrow street hums with similar workshops, one after another, their doorways spilling out color, sound, and laughter. A woman kneels beside a basin, washing newly fired cups in cool water. Another artist leans over a table, painting the fine details of a scene. A chariot race, perhaps, or a symposium in miniature. You recognize the careful outlines of red figure technique, where the background is painted black, leaving the figures in the natural color of the clay. Those red figure vases are the new fashion, says the potter, noticing your interest. More natural poses, more detail. Everyone wants them now. The old black figure masters grumble that the world's gone soft. He leans closer and lowers his voice. Between us, I still prefer the old way. Bold, simple. You could see the story even in the dark. You grin, like bedtime pottery. He laughs, a deep, contented sound. Exactly, pots to fall asleep by. He gestures toward the back of the workshop. Go on, wander. Just don't touch anything that's still wet. It remembers fingerprints. You wander through the workspace, the floor cool beneath your sandals. On one table lies a half-finished kylix, a shallow wine cup. The painter has started sketching a reclining figure, perhaps Dionysus himself, lounging amid vines. Next to it sits a small, lumpy piece shaped like a frog. That's mine, says a voice behind you. You turn to see the apprentice, barely 12, his face smeared with soot. It's a god of luck, he explains. I made it from leftover clay. The master says it looks more like a potato. You smile kindly. Every god has to start somewhere. He grins, clearly pleased with the answer. Maybe mine will guard the kiln, he says, placing the frog carefully beside the fire. You step outside again. The sun has begun to slide lower in the sky, and the clay streets have taken on a warm amber hue. Farther down the lane, you can hear the rhythmic tapping of tools and the crackle of a fire being stoked higher. The scent of burning pine resin drifts through the air, mixing with the earthy sweetness of baked clay. A man walks past, carrying a tall amphora balanced on his shoulder, its freshly painted surface gleaming. Careful with that, someone calls. That's an order for the temple. Took me a week. Relax, the man shouts back. I'm not Poseidon. I don't break things just to prove a point. You chuckle softly. The people here treat their craft with the same reverence others reserve for prayer. In a city that worships beauty, the potter's quarter is something like a quiet temple, humble but sacred in its own way. At the far end of the lane, an older woman sits in the doorway of her studio, painting delicate lines on a series of small oil lamps. Athens loves its light, she says without looking up. Every home needs one for the hearth. Every temple needs dozens. Even the poorest house burns a little flame for Hestia. She glances up and adds dryly, of course, half of them forget to clean the soot. Her cat yawns nearby, covered in a faint dusting of red clay. He's part of the process, she says. Sits on finished pots until I sell them. Brings luck, or hair, depending on your beliefs. You pause beside a stack of finished wares, amphora, craters, little figurines shaped like birds and horses. Each piece tells a fragment of the Athenian story. Everyday life, mythology, victory, laughter, it's all there, captured in the swirl of a potter's brush. A group of apprentices gathers nearby, comparing sketches. One holds up a design of Heracles wrestling a lion. Another laughs and shows a far less heroic attempt that looks more like a confused cat. They tease each other, voices echoing down the alley. And you can't help but think that somewhere, centuries from now, archaeologists will dig up one of these practice pots and call it ceremonial art. The sun is low now, turning the smoke above the kilns into streaks of rose and silver. A faint wind stirs, cooling the sweat on your neck. The potter from earlier steps outside, wiping his hands on his apron. He squints at the horizon. Good weather for firing, he says. The air's steady, no sudden drafts. He looks at you and adds, people forget how much the gods of the air decide our craft. You can plan, shape, paint, but one gust of wind in the kiln and it's all shards. So we make our offerings, burn a little incense, whisper a prayer to Hephaestus, and hope for steady hands and steady weather. You nod, glancing at the rising smoke. Seems the gods and the potters both work in fire. He smiles, eyes crinkling. Yes, but only one of us has to clean the ashes. A final laugh, soft and content, ripples through the fading light. Around you, the quarter settles into evening rhythm. Fires dimming, clay drying, laughter fading to murmurs. Someone starts humming, a slow tune that drifts between the houses, gentle as a lullaby for the earth itself. You take one last look at the row of workshops glowing in the dusk, each kiln like a small sun in its own world. The pottery of Athens, you realize, isn't just art, it's the city's heartbeat made tangible. And as the sky deepens toward violet, the pots, the painters, and the clay all seem to exhale together in quiet satisfaction. The heat of the afternoon wraps around you like a heavy, sun-warmed blanket. After hours of wandering through the dusty brilliance of Athens, the markets, the temples, the potter's kilns, you start to crave stillness. Luckily, Athenians are masters of finding rest in the middle of bustle. You follow the sound of trickling water through narrow lanes until you find a small public fountain tucked between two olive-shaded courtyards. The fountain isn't grand like those in Rome will one day be, but it's beautiful in a quiet, handmade way. A lion's head carved into marble spits a thin stream of cool water into a stone basin. The edges of the pool are worn smooth by countless hands and feet. The sound of the water is soft and constant, like breathing or a low conversation between stones. You sit on the edge and dip your fingers in. The chill shocks your skin at first, then melts into something blissful. You lean forward, splash your face, and feel the clay dust of the Kerameikos run off your skin. A small breeze passes, carrying the mingled scents of figs, wild mint, and olive oil from a nearby food stall. Two old men sit on a low bench beside the fountain, playing a lazy game of knucklebones. Their conversation drifts in and out of philosophy and weather. Zeus must be napping, one says, squinting at the cloudless sky. Not a drop of rain all week. The other chuckles. Let him sleep. Last time he woke up angry, my roof tiles went flying. You smile faintly, letting their words wash over you. The whole scene feels like a sigh after a long breath. The city pausing between morning labor and evening festivity. Even the cicadas seem to slow their rhythm, as if Athens itself is exhaling. Nearby, a group of women gather around a communal washing basin. They laugh quietly as they scrub linen against smooth stones, the rhythmic motion like music against the gentle murmur of the fountain. One hums a tune that sounds like an old hymn. Another harmonizes softly. A baby in a wicker cradle kicks its feet in the shade, delighted by the dappled light shifting above. Across the square, a street musician sets down his lyre. He plucks a few tentative notes, adjusts the tension, then lets a melody unfurl. Light, circular, hypnotic. The sound ripples across the fountain's surface, blending with the splash of water. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and the city fades into a tapestry of sound. Laughter, footsteps, the whisper of leaves, the quiet rhythm of life continuing gently around you. When you open your eyes again, a boy is standing a few paces away, holding a tray of honeyed pastries. "Want one?" he asks. "Fresh from my mother's kitchen. Only a couple obols." You take one, the dough still warm, the honey sticky and fragrant. "Thank you." He beams. "Careful, Athena herself might steal one if you don't eat it fast." "Would she do that?" you ask, amused. He shrugs. "Historians still argue whether gods have a sweet tooth." You laugh quietly, biting into the pastry. It's soft, a little gritty with crushed almonds, and utterly delicious. "Tell your mother she's blessed by the muses," you say. He grins wider. "She already says that, especially when my father tries to cook." The boy trots off toward another patch of shade, calling to potential customers. His voice fades into the hum of the fountain. The two men nearby are now arguing over something obscure, probably philosophy disguised as gossip. "You can't call it courage," one insists, tapping his knee with a knucklebone. "It's just stubbornness with better posture." His friend laughs. "That's what courage is. The difference is whether anyone writes about it afterward." Their laughter drifts lazily through the air. You can almost see Socrates somewhere nearby, smiling and preparing to ask them both 30 more questions until they forget what the argument was about. A young woman carrying a clay jug approaches the fountain. Her robe is simple but neatly pinned, her hair tied with a strip of blue fabric. She greets you with a polite nod before kneeling to fill her vessel. As the water pours, she glances up. "They say this fountain was built by Pisistratus back when he was trying to make the city look prosperous." "Really?" you ask. She nods. "A tyrant, yes, but at least he understood plumbing." You chuckle. "Not a bad legacy." She smiles faintly. "My grandmother says the water here tastes sweeter. Maybe that's just superstition, but superstition keeps people hydrated." You swirl your fingers through the cool water again. Athenians seem to mix practicality and poetry in everything. She tilts her head thoughtfully. "Maybe they're the same thing, at least when the sun is this hot." Her jug fills, and she stands gracefully, wiping her hands on her robe. "Enjoy your rest," she says, and disappears back down the winding street. You stretch your legs, letting your sandals dry on the warm stone. A cat, possibly the same one from the potter's quarter, pads over and curls up near your knee. It closes its eyes instantly, as though your stillness is contagious. You reach down and scratch behind its ear. It purrs faintly, the sound merging perfectly with the fountain song. A breeze picks up again, gentle and cool this time. You look around the square. A few vendors doze behind their stalls. A pair of children chase a butterfly until it disappears into the branches of a fig tree. A beggar sits quietly on the far edge of the plaza, eyes half closed, humming to himself, a melody with no beginning or end. The fountain itself becomes a mirror for the city. Reflections of passing clouds, the gleam of a bronze jug, the shifting outlines of leaves overhead. You imagine ancient poets sitting here once, composing verses about water and time, about the way things flow and change, but always return. And perhaps they weren't wrong. The water that runs through this fountain likely once flowed through mountain springs, across hillsides where shepherds grazed their flocks. It trickled into the Ilissos River, where philosophers walked barefoot and debated whether souls have weight. Now it cools your fingertips. A cycle, simple and profound. You lean back on your elbows, half closing your eyes. Someone nearby has started singing softly, a melody you recognize from a festival. The words are about Persephone's return from the underworld, about renewal and patience. The singer's voice is thin and clear, weaving in and out of the chatter like sunlight through leaves. In the distance, a bell chimes from a temple. Just once, a reminder of the hour. A few people stir, stretch, gather their baskets. The city is slowly waking from its midday dream. Before you rise, you take another long look at the water. The lion's head, worn smooth, seems almost to smile. You imagine the centuries of people who have stopped here just as you have. Soldiers, potters, philosophers, lovers. All of them pausing to rest, to drink, to cool their hands in the same basin. Time folds gently in on itself, and you feel momentarily timeless, one small part of Athens' long afternoon. The cat yawns, rolls over, and blinks at you as if to say, "Move if you must, but I'm staying right here." You grin and whisper, "Wise choice." You stand, stretch, and give one last nod to the fountain. The air feels lighter now, the heat less oppressive. You can hear distant voices rising from the Pnyx Hill, citizens gathering for the assembly. The hum of public debate is already building like thunder beneath the calm sky. As you walk away, the sound of the fountain fades behind you, replaced by the pulse of the city returning to motion. The cat is asleep again, the old men still arguing gently, and the fountain continues to pour, indifferent and eternal, its water whispering secrets to anyone who pauses long enough to listen. You follow the growing murmur of voices through the winding streets, climbing gradually upward toward the open expanse of the Pnyx Hill. The path is dusty but familiar to every Athenian citizen, the road to the heart of democracy. The afternoon light lies soft and golden across the slope, catching on the uneven stones. You pass men in short cloaks, some barefoot, some carrying scrolls, others with olives and bread tucked under their arms, ready for a long debate. The air hums with the low, constant buzz of conversation, the sound of 1,000 opinions preparing to collide. At the top of the hill, the city opens up before you. The Parthenon gleams in the distance, and beyond it, the Aegean flashes silver under the sun. But here on the Sphinx, the view is secondary to the voices. Rows of citizens gather on the rough-hewn stone benches carved directly into the hillside. No marble here, no gilded pillars, just rock, sweat, and the chatter of free men deciding how their world should run. You find a place among them, near a cluster of older men who seem to know the rhythm of things. One leans toward you and says, "You're early. The speaker's not due for another quarter hour. Plenty of time to guess how long today's speeches will last." "Long enough to forget what we were voting on," his friend mutters dryly. You smile, settling in. The crowd continues to swell, a slow tide of tunics and sandals. The sun presses down, and a few men fan themselves with folded scraps of papyrus. A water seller weaves through the assembly, shouting his wares. "Cool from the fountain, 2 obols." Someone heckles back, "Make it 1, and I'll vote your way." The laughter that follows is warm and easy. This isn't the solemn, polished democracy described in future textbooks. It's noisy, unpredictable, and faintly ridiculous. But it's also alive. Every man here carries a stake in the fate of the city, and that sense of shared ownership crackles in the air. At last, a herald steps forward to signal the beginning. His voice booms across the stone. "Citizens of Athens, the assembly is convened." The murmurs fade into an expectant hush. You can almost feel the collective inhale. The first speaker ascends the bema, a raised stone platform, and adjusts his cloak with theatrical precision. "Men of Athens," he begins, in a tone that clearly indicates he's practiced this opening countless times. "I come before you today to speak of ships, taxes, and the alarming increase in lazy apprentices." The crowd chuckles softly, but the man presses on. His voice rises and falls like waves, alternating between passionate pleas and sharp jokes. You can't help noticing how much of this gathering depends on rhythm. The orator's tone, the audience's reactions, the subtle pauses that allow for cheers or jeers. It's part theater, part negotiation, part group therapy. Historians still argue, you think wryly, whether these meetings advanced democracy or just developed better hecklers. A few minutes in, an older man beside you leans over. He's one of Cleon's supporters, he whispers. Always talks loud about honesty. Borrowed my goat last week and hasn't returned it. You try not to laugh too loudly. The speaker continues, waxing eloquent about civic pride and maritime glory. Occasionally, the crowd bursts into applause. Occasionally, someone shouts an insult involving a donkey. When he finishes, sweating and triumphant, another man takes his place. A lean figure with sun-darkened skin and a calm voice that cuts neatly through the noise. "Friends," he begins simply, "we've heard about ships and goats and taxes, but I ask you, what good is a fleet if our hearts are divided?" A murmur of approval ripples through the crowd. This one, you can tell, has the gift. He speaks without theatrics, his words like steady hammer blows shaping sense from chaos. He talks of unity, fairness, and the importance of remembering that democracy is both privilege and burden. You glance around as he speaks. Some men nod thoughtfully. Others frown, calculating what the speech means for their interests. A few have clearly drifted into daydreams. One man's head tilts so far back you half expect a snore. Democracy, apparently, has always tested attention spans. When the orator finishes, the herald invites open discussion. The noise rises again, hundreds of voices, each with an opinion to offer. Some argue earnestly about trade policy. Others complain about the price of bread or the state of the city drains. A young man nearby insists that Athens needs more statues. His neighbor groans. "We don't need more statues, we need fewer speeches." It's chaotic, sometimes absurd, but it's also magnificent. The idea that ordinary citizens, not kings or priests, can decide the fate of a city. You sit there, listening to the ebb and flow, and it feels almost miraculous. A sudden commotion stirs on the far side of the assembly. Someone's trying to push forward, a disheveled figure with wild hair and an expression halfway between brilliance and mischief. You hear murmurs ripple through the crowd. "Socrates again," someone sighs. "Doesn't he ever get tired of asking questions?" Apparently not. He stands where he is and begins to speak, his voice mild but persistent. "Tell me, friends, if a man governs poorly, but the people chose him, whose fault is it? The rulers or the ruled?" A groan ripples through the audience. "It's too hot for philosophy," someone yells. Socrates smiles faintly, undeterred. "Ah, but heat makes the mind sharper, or so the gods tell me." You can't help laughing quietly. The man's tone is gentle, almost teasing, yet his questions stick in the air like burrs. Even the hecklers listen, if only to roll their eyes with more precision. Eventually, the herald waves him off politely. The assembly, it seems, has a schedule, even for philosophers. A vote is called next. Wooden ballots are distributed, and the citizens cast their decisions by dropping them into jars marked for or against. It's simple, tangible democracy. No parchment, no bureaucracy, just stones and conviction. The process feels almost sacred in its simplicity. As the votes are counted, you look around again. The afternoon light has shifted. Long shadows stretch across the stone seats. The Acropolis gleams against the blue sky, a silent witness to this noisy ritual below. The result is announced. Cheers from one faction, groans from another. The debate is done, the decision made, until the next argument begins tomorrow. The herald raises his hands for quiet, though it's half-hearted. The assembly dissolves like a wave breaking apart, its energy scattering back into the city's veins. Men stretch, laugh, clap each other on the shoulder. Some head downhill toward the taverns. Others linger to continue smaller debates that will likely last until sunset. You stay seated for a moment, feeling the roughness of the stone beneath your palms. An old man nearby turns to you with a wry smile. "It's a fine system," he says. "Everyone gets to speak, and no one listens." You grin. "That's democracy." He laughs, coughing a little. "Yes, but at least it's ours." As the crowd thins, the sound softens from a roar to a murmur to a hum. You stand and make your way toward the crest of the hill. From here, you can see all of Athens, the Agora, the shining temples, the distant curve of the sea. The city looks calm, but you know its calm comes from motion, from voices constantly colliding and reshaping. Like pottery in a kiln, the heat of disagreement gives it form. You pause to watch the sun dip lower, staining the sky in gold and coral. Somewhere below, laughter drifts up from the taverns. The scent of grilled fish and wine reaches your nose, and your stomach reminds you that civic virtue doesn't fill an empty belly. As you start down the path, you glance back one last time at the planets. Empty now, quiet. It feels almost like a sleeping giant, still warm from the noise of its heartbeat. And you think that maybe this, more than temples or marble, is what makes Athens eternal. The faith that truth can be found in conversation, even if it takes a few thousand arguments. You leave the echo of the Pnyx behind, following the slope downward into the hum of afternoon life. The heat lies heavy now, pressing like a warm hand over the city, and the streets have quieted just a little. Merchants leaning in the shade, dogs sprawled in dusty patches, and the faint creak of carts moving slowly along the stones. You wander toward the Keramakis district, the heart of Athenian craftsmanship, where the rhythm of the city shifts from politics to production. Here, the scent of wet clay and burning charcoal fills the air. The melodic clang of metal against metal drifts from nearby workshops. You pause outside a potter's shed, drawn by the hypnotic spin of the wheel and the earthy, steady scrape of shaping hands. Inside, a man in a short tunic leans over the clay, his forearms slick with water and grit. "Ah," he says without looking up, "come in, traveler. Watch, but mind your sandals, this place eats dust." You step inside carefully. The floor is cool and damp, scattered with shards of failed pots and fragments painted in fading black and red. The potter's wheel turns slowly, steady as a heartbeat. He presses his thumbs into the clay, drawing it upward, coaxing it into life. "It's all about balance," he murmurs. "Push too hard and it collapses. Be too gentle and it stays shapeless. Athenian politics could learn something from clay, eh?" You chuckle softly. "I just came from the Pnyx. Maybe you should give the next speech." He grins. No, my audience is quieter." He gestures to the shelf beside him. Rows of amphora, kylixes, and craters in various stages of completion. The air smells faintly metallic from the slip paint used to create those rich, glossy black figures that decorate nearly every Greek pot you've ever seen in a museum. One piece shows Heracles wrestling a lion. Another shows men reclining at a symposium, cups raised, smiles frozen mid-toast. The detail is delicate, the lines graceful and sure. As the potter works, a boy, his apprentice, rushes in carrying a tray of tiny pots. "These are ready for the kiln," he announces, though the tremor in his hands suggests this declaration might not be entirely confident. The potter examines one critically. Thin walls, might crack, but you're learning." He looks at you, amused. Historians still argue whether apprenticeships made craftsmen or merely broke spirits. I say it depends on the master. The boy rolls his eyes, a universal gesture across all centuries. Outside, the sound of hammering grows louder. You follow it to the next workshop, where bronze glows like liquid sunlight. Two smiths are at work, one pounding a sheet of metal into shape, the other polishing a finished shield until it mirrors the sun itself. Sparks leap with every blow, and the air tastes faintly of smoke and heat. One of them, seeing your interest, grins. "You're lucky," he shouts over the ringing noise. "Today's batch is for the hoplites. Lightweight shields, new style. See the curve? Deflects arrows better." He runs his hand along the surface lovingly. Bronze, tin, a touch of art, and a lot of sweat. That's the recipe. He pauses, wiping his brow with a forearm. "We make everything here. Helmets, mirrors, statues, even those fancy door hinges for rich folks up on the Acropolis. You'd be surprised what people pay for hinges." You smile. "I'll keep that in mind next time I redecorate my temple." He laughs, shaking his head. Don't we all wish for a temple? In the corner, a sculptor chisels marble, his mallet tapping impatient rhythm. The dust clings to his hair, his arms, even his eyelashes. You watch as the form begins to emerge, a young athlete caught in motion, muscles alive beneath the stone. There's something astonishing about it, this ability to pull grace from rock. You ask how he knows when it's finished. When it stops talking back, he replies simply. Sometimes that takes months, sometimes never. He pauses, then adds quietly, "You know, some say we don't carve the statue at all. We just remove the stone that hides it." You think about that as you wander further. The idea seems to fit the city itself, a place constantly shaping and reshaping itself, revealing its form through labor and imagination. Athens isn't static, it's always in motion, a pot on the wheel, a chisel at the marble, a vote on the hill. Further down the street, you come to a row of textile shops where women sit beneath canopies, spinning wool and weaving on tall looms. Their fingers move with mechanical rhythm, passing the shuttle back and forth, tightening the warp and weft. The patterns are geometric, precise, hypnotic. A few of the women glance up, smiling faintly before returning to their work. One of them, older and sharp-eyed, calls out to you. "You there, don't just stand like a statue. You ever try weaving?" You admit you haven't. "Good," she says, nodding sagely. "You'd ruin it." You laugh. "You sound sure." She grins, flashing a gap-toothed smile. "Because every man who thinks weaving looks easy ends up tangling himself in the thread. Ask Odysseus's wife if you don't believe me." You linger to watch. The rhythmic clack of the loom feels almost like a lullaby, steady and soothing. For a moment, you forget you're in a bustling city. The world narrows to the sound of thread against wood and the flicker of sunlight through the fibers. A younger woman hums softly as she works, an old tune about Persephone and the seasons. "We weave the same stories our mothers did," she tells you. Change the pattern, and someone complains you're doing it wrong. Keep it the same, and they say you lack imagination. There's no winning, only weaving. It's a sentiment you've heard before, in different forms. The city runs on the same tension, tradition versus innovation, structure versus freedom. Maybe that's the secret ingredient that keeps Athens alive, the gentle friction of disagreement, whether in thread or thought. You notice a small shrine tucked beside the workshop, a simple clay figure of Athena Polias, goddess of wisdom and crafts, her tiny owl perched beside her. Offerings of flowers and coins rest at her feet. A candle flickers, its wax running in lazy trails down the base. You drop a small coin, just for luck. The air feels a little cooler as you step back into the street. Farther along, you find a stall selling painted trinkets and figurines, small scenes of gods, animals, and mythic heroes, all molded from clay. The merchant, a cheerful man with a crooked nose, greets you eagerly. "You look like someone who appreciates fine art," he says, clearly having said the same line to everyone else today. You pick up a small figure of a satyr holding a flute. "Charming," you say. He leans closer conspiratorially. "It's said these little figures bring good dreams if you place them by your bed, or terrible ones if you forget to pay for them." You raise an eyebrow. "A powerful curse for such a tiny satyr." "Powerful city, powerful souvenirs," he grins. You hand over a coin and tuck the figure into your pouch. Maybe a little good luck can't hurt. As the sun tilts westward, the workshops begin to quiet. The potters wash their hands, the smiths bank their fires, and the weavers hang up their threads. The air cools slightly, carrying with it the mingled scents of clay, smoke, and roasted grain from nearby bakeries. You pass one where a baker pulls flat loaves from a stone oven. He waves you over. "Try one, still warm." You break the bread and share a piece. It's soft, fragrant, touched with olive oil. The baker wipes his hands on his apron and sighs contentedly. "You can keep your philosophers," he says. "Bread, that's real wisdom." You can't argue with that. As you walk on, the sounds of industry fade behind you, replaced by the softer murmur of evening. Voices, birds, the rhythmic creak of ox carts heading home. The city exhales after a long day of creation. Everywhere you look, there's evidence of hands shaping something. Pots, tools, cloth, dreams. Athens isn't just a city of thinkers, you realize. It's a city of makers, and the hum of their work is as sacred as any hymn. As twilight begins to pool between the rooftops, the city comes alive again with a quieter, more festive energy. You follow the flow of people descending the southern slope of the Acropolis, where laughter and conversation roll like distant surf. The scent of wine and grilled meat drifts through the air, mingling with the earthy tang of the stone. Ahead, the great semicircle of the Theater of Dionysus opens beneath the fading sky, carved into the hillside and facing the glimmering sea beyond. You pause for a moment, just to take it in. The marble seating tiers curve around the stage like an embrace, glowing gold in the low light. Torches flicker along the edges, and a gentle breeze carries the rustle of cloaks, the soft murmur of anticipation. Somewhere, a lyre is being tuned. It's the world's first great stage, and tonight, you're part of its audience. "Come, friend," calls a cheerful man beside you, clutching a small wineskin. "You'll miss the best seats if you stand there gawking. The gods don't wait for latecomers." You find a spot on the stone benches halfway up, warm from the sun, but cooling fast under the evening air. The crowd is a patchwork of citizens, young men in break chitons, elders wrapped in heavy cloaks, a few women peering from shaded corners, technically not supposed to attend, though everyone knows they do. There's laughter, teasing, a few good-natured shouts of "move over" as everyone squeezes in. The theater holds perhaps 17,000 souls when full. Tonight, it seems nearly there. You can feel the collective pulse, the hum of excitement, the electric tension before the first note of music. Someone offers you a sip of wine, which you accept. It's strong, sharp, and tastes faintly of smoke. The drums begin softly. A chorus of flutes answers. The chatter fades, replaced by a hush so complete you can hear the faint click of sandals shifting on the stone. Then the chorus enters, a swirl of masked figures dancing in rhythm, their voices rising in haunting, melodic unison. The story unfolds not through spectacle, but through sound and movement. Words shaped into poetry, gestures that seem to summon the gods themselves. Tonight's play is a new work by Euripides, still controversial, still whispered about for his modern ideas. You hear someone behind you murmur, "Too clever for his own good." Another replies, "That's why the gods keep him humble." You smile. Some things, it seems, never change. The chorus begins their opening ode, praising Dionysus, god of wine and revelry, patron of this very art. The dancers move in a circle, arms raised, masks gleaming in the torchlight. The rhythm builds, rising and falling like a tide. The music is hypnotic. You feel it in your chest, in the soles of your feet, in the slow syncopation of the crowd's breathing. And then the protagonist appears, tall, robed, his mask carved with an expression of anguish so vivid it almost breathes. His voice carries effortlessly through the air, shaped by the perfect acoustics of the theater. You lean forward, caught in the gravity of his speech. He speaks of loyalty and pride, of gods who play with mortal fates like children with toys. The crowd reacts audibly, gasps, murmurs, the occasional bark of laughter when the playwright slips in a sly jab at Athenian politics. You can feel the audience thinking together, each man turning the words over in his mind like stones smoothed by water. At one point, the actor raises his arms and cries out, "What is man that he builds and prays and still is dust?" The silence that follows is total. Historians still argue whether the theater was meant as worship or therapy, you think. But sitting here, you realize it's both. Beside you, the man with the wineskin whispers, "Every time I see one of these plays, I swear I'll stop complaining about my goats." And then, the next morning, he takes a long swig and grins. "I complain about my goats." You laugh quietly. The actor would probably approve. The play unfolds in acts of sorrow and irony. There are moments of laughter, too, dark, nervous laughter that feels like a release valve. The chorus dances between each scene, commenting, mourning, and occasionally mocking. Their words drift like a chant, part wisdom, part warning, part lullaby. As the night deepens, the torches are replaced one by one. The stars prick through the darkening sky above, like curious eyes watching from Olympus. The air cools, carrying the smell of sea salt and olive smoke from the distant harbor. You pull your cloak tighter and listen as the final act approaches. The hero, betrayed and broken, falls to his knees before the altar on stage. The chorus gathers around him, their movements slow and solemn. The music fades to a single flute note trembling in the night. The final line is delivered, a quiet question rather than a declaration. Is it the gods who test men, or men who test themselves? No one answers. The silence lingers, heavy and holy. Then the chorus lifts their hands in farewell, and the play ends, not with applause, but with stillness. For a long moment, the city itself seems to hold its breath. Then the spell breaks. The crowd exhales, shifting, murmuring, clapping softly at first, then louder. The actors bow, removing their masks to reveal sweat-shined faces, human again after their divine masquerade. You clap too, though part of you wants to remain in that suspended quiet just a little longer. There's something deeply peaceful about it, a reminder that even in tragedy, beauty survives. The man beside you stretches with a groan. "Well," he says, "that was cheerful. Remind me to bring more wine next time." You grin. "Maybe bring your goats too. They could use the moral education." He chuckles, offering you another swig. "Ah, you're learning the Athenian way, philosophy with refreshments." As the theater empties, people linger in clusters, talking animatedly about the play. Some argue over interpretations, others praise or mock the actors. You overhear one man insisting that Euripides is ruining the purity of drama, while another replies, "Purity's overrated. Give me something that makes me think." You stroll down the aisle slowly, letting the crowd thin ahead of you. A young woman collecting props pauses to douse a torch, and the flame sputters before vanishing, leaving a trail of smoke that curls into the night. At the edge of the stage, you glance back one last time. The seats gleam faintly in the starlight, rows upon rows like ripples in a calm sea. You imagine all the stories told here, the laughter, the tears, the debates afterward that probably lasted until dawn. This was more than entertainment. It was education, reflection, communion. Athens didn't just build theaters, it built empathy. As you step into the street again, the night hums with life. Tavern songs drift through the air, mingling with the soft pluck of a lyre from a nearby courtyard. The city seems to glow faintly, lit not just by torches, but by the collective afterglow of a shared experience. You walk slowly, following the curve of the Acropolis above, where the Parthenon gleams pale against the stars. Somewhere below, laughter ripples, then fades. The air feels softer now, touched with the kind of tired contentment that comes only after a good story. And as you wander back toward your quarters, you think about how strange and beautiful it is that thousands of years later, humans will still gather in darkened rooms to watch others pretend, to cry and laugh and feel, just as you did tonight. The masks may change, the language may shift, but the need is the same. To understand ourselves, we act it out. The next morning rises soft and golden, sunlight spilling across the marble rooftops like warm honey. You wake to the distant coo of pigeons and the faint clatter of the market stirring to life. After the bustle and talk and laughter of the previous day, the city feels calmer today. Still busy, yes, but quieter in spirit, like a deep breath drawn before prayer. You decide to follow that stillness, tracing it toward the heart of Athens' spiritual life, the sacred way leading up to the temples of the Acropolis. You begin your walk through the winding streets as the city shakes itself awake. Merchants are just setting up their stalls. The smell of freshly baked bread mixes with that of incense and olive oil. A group of women passes you, carrying baskets of laurel leaves and offerings, their chatter gentle and rhythmic. "For Athena," one says, smiling, "always for Athena." The sacred way climbs slowly upward, lined with shrines, statues, and little altars tucked into corners where travelers stop to whisper prayers. Each shrine has its own quiet personality, one draped in fresh flowers, another with the remnants of last night's candles still smoking faintly. The stones underfoot are worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims. Every step feels deliberate, ritualistic, as if you're walking not just through the city, but through time itself. A priest in a white robe passes, nodding politely. He's leading a small group of initiates, their heads bowed. You overhear him explaining how the sacred way once stretched all the way to Eleusis, miles away, a long, sacred procession in honor of Demeter and Persephone. Historians still argue, he says to his students, whether those mysteries promised salvation or simply good harvests. One of the initiates whispers, "Maybe both." The priest smiles without answering. You continue walking, stopping now and then to take in the details carved into the stone. The faint outlines of heroes, gods, animals, each figure softened by time. Near one shrine, you spot a curious detail, a small, weathered carving of a man holding what looks like a loaf of bread in one hand and a lizard in the other. A local boy notices you staring and laughs. "That's for luck," he says. "Bread for plenty, lizard for protection. My grandmother swears by it." You raise an eyebrow. "Does it work?" He shrugs. "She's still alive, so maybe." You smile, dropping a coin into the offering bowl beside the shrine. Better not risk it. The climb grows steeper, but the air feels lighter here, scented faintly with pine and myrrh. The city sounds fade behind you, the chatter of the market replaced by the hum of cicadas and the whisper of sandals on stone. The Parthenon gleams ahead, its white marble columns almost glowing against the deep blue sky. As you near the entrance to the Acropolis, the Grand Propylaea looms before you, a monumental gateway of columns and steps, guarded by statues of Athena and Hermes. The guards nod you through. Beyond, the world opens into a realm that feels less like a city and more like an eternal thought made solid. The Parthenon stands at the center, perfect and commanding. Every line and proportion calculated with maddening precision, yet softened by the warmth of the morning light. You move closer, craning your neck upward. The temple's friezes still shimmer faintly with color, the remnants of once bright paints now ghost-like against the stone. The sculpted figures, gods, heroes, horses, seem alive in the stillness, frozen mid-motion. You step inside the colonnade, where cool shadows replace the sun's heat. The air feels different here, thicker, sacred, as though it carries whispers too faint for the ear. At the far end stands the great statue of Athena Parthenos, once towering in gold and ivory. Though time has eroded her shine, you can almost imagine the way she must have gleamed when first unveiled. Helmet crested, spear raised, eyes fierce and calm at once. A priestess moves quietly nearby, tending to a small flame at the base of the statue. You bow slightly as you pass, and she acknowledges you with a nod. Her voice, when she speaks, is low but resonant. "Athena does not demand devotion," she says, "only attention. The wise never stop looking up." You thank her softly and step back outside into the sunlight. From this height, Athens spreads out below you like a living mosaic. Temples, homes, olive groves, and the glittering sea. You can almost trace your journey through it. The agora's noise, the potter's rhythm, the laughter in the theater. Each piece a reflection of the goddess herself. Craft, reason, creativity, courage. You notice a group of young men gathering at a nearby altar. They're preparing a small sacrifice, their movements careful and rehearsed. One carries a basket of barley, another holds a jug of wine. A third gently leads a small goat forward, its coat gleaming white in the sun. You stand back and watch as the priest raises his hands. The chants begin, low and melodic. Barley is sprinkled, wine is poured. The goat bleats softly, unaware of its role in this ancient exchange. When it's over, the smoke curls upward in a lazy spiral, vanishing into the bright blue sky. It's peaceful, strangely so. Not gruesome, not frenzied, just sacred. You realize that, to these people, the gods aren't distant abstractions. They're neighbors, forces woven into every olive tree, every gust of sea wind, every stroke of a sculptor's chisel. Some say, murmurs an old woman beside you, that when the wind blows through the olive branches, it's Athena whispering. I always listen. You glance at the grove below, and for a moment, you almost believe it. A light breeze stirs your hair, carrying the faint scent of olives and salt. The city seems to hum with invisible threads connecting the divine and the mundane, the same threads that bind every act of creation, from a poem to a pot. You wander around the Acropolis Plateau, visiting smaller shrines, the Temple of Nike, the tiny, elegant Erechtheion with its caryatid maidens standing eternally at attention. Their faces are serene, their draped robes flowing like water frozen in stone. You pause to study them, thinking how strange it is that beauty and duty can coexist so perfectly. A group of visiting scholars debates nearby, their gestures animated. No, one insists. The Erechtheion honors Poseidon as well. Another shakes his head. Athena only. Poseidon merely lost the contest. Historians still argue about that, you think, smiling. They notice your amusement, and one of them waves dismissively. It doesn't matter, he says. The gods have long since chosen their sides. We're the ones still catching up. By midday, the sunlight grows fierce, glinting off every column and corner. You find shade beneath a small olive tree, one of the sacred descendants of Athena's mythical gift. Sitting there, you take a slow drink of water and listen to the world hum around you. The songs of birds, the murmur of prayer, the faint clang of a blacksmith echoing from below. It's impossible not to feel something here, whether awe, peace, or the faint prick of longing. The Athenians might call it eusebeia, reverent mindfulness. You might just call it presence. You lie back for a moment, closing your eyes, letting the warmth of the stones seep through your cloak. You can almost hear the whisper of the city breathing, alive, thoughtful, imperfect, divine. And as the afternoon begins to lean toward gold once more, you rise and make your way down the slope, leaving the temples behind. The sacred way stretches ahead again, bathed in light, each stone a silent record of devotion and dust. For now, the gods have been honored, and the city hums in quiet balance. But even as you descend, you know that Athens, ever restless, ever curious, will never stay quiet for long. Its questions are its prayers, its laughter, its offering. You make your way back toward the Agora as the sun dips low, painting the sky in shades of rose, amber, and fading gold. The city has begun its evening transformation. The market stalls shuttered or quietly packed away, the smells of fresh bread and roasting fish mingling with the crisp air of approaching night. The streets are quieter now, but not silent. Athens hums gently, like a city exhaling after a long day of work, debate, and devotion. You pause at the steps of the Agora, watching the last vendors carry baskets home. An old man sits on a bench, polishing a bronze coin as though it were the most delicate treasure in the world. Nearby, a pair of children chase each other in fading sunlight, their laughter ringing soft and sweet, bouncing off stone walls. You notice the shadows stretching long, merging with one another, blurring the edges of the city into calmness. The central fountain splashes quietly, a gentle reminder of midday, now echoing softly in the evening air. A cat curls beside the water basin, just as it did yesterday, tail wrapped neatly around its paws. You crouch and scratch behind its ear. It purrs, a small vibration against the hum of the city. Some things never change, you think. The rhythm of daily life, the simple pleasures, the small beings who make their world lively. From the distant heights of the Acropolis, the Parthenon's columns glow faintly in the dying light. You remember the temples, the sacred way, the Erechtheon's serene caryatids. Athens is a city of contrasts, labor and leisure, debate and devotion, laughter and contemplation. Yet, despite all its layers, it feels coherent, almost musical in its rhythms, each note perfectly placed, even when it seems chaotic. A small group of women passes by, carrying empty clay pots. They laugh quietly at something one has said, their voices soft in the evening stillness. The scent of olive oil and baked bread lingers in the air. You inhale slowly, letting the aromas, sounds, and sights settle around you. They mingle with memory of the Pnyx Hill, the Potter's District, the theater, and the Sacred Way, folding the day into a single living moment. Somewhere close, a lyre strings a final melody, a quiet tune that could have been a lullaby or a prayer. The notes drift faintly across the plaza. You imagine an Athenian musician centuries ago doing exactly the same, letting music soften the edges of the world, signaling rest, reflection, or reverence. You walk slowly through the emptying Agora, stepping lightly over scattered petals, a dropped coin, the occasional fragment of pottery. Your eyes wander over the stone benches and worn pathways, recalling the voices of philosophers, politicians, artisans, and children. Historians still argue whether daily life or monumental architecture shaped the city's soul more, you think, smiling at the gentle absurdity of it. But for now, it doesn't matter. The city feels whole, breathing softly under the fading sun. Finding a quiet corner beneath an olive tree, you sit and let the day's experiences wash over you. You remember the warmth of the potter's workshop, the hypnotic rhythm of the weaver's looms, the suspense of the theater, the sacred hush of the Acropolis. Each memory drifts into the next like water moving over pebbles, seamless, gentle, and calming. The evening air cools further. Somewhere, a dog stretches and yawns. A distant bell tolls the hour. You pull your cloak tighter and close your eyes for a long moment, letting the city's cadence lull you. The sun dips behind the horizon, leaving the sky a tapestry of deep purple, indigo, and the first glitter of stars. Athens exhales once more. You feel yourself exhaling with it. Everything you've seen, the voices, the work, the laughter, the devotion, folds inward, becoming a soft, warm presence in your chest. The city slows. Your breathing slows. The day's edges blur into gentle shadows. You are part of Athens now, even if only for a fleeting evening, connected to the rhythms of a city that has shaped itself and been shaped in return. And as night falls completely, you feel a rare, tender clarity. The markets, the fountains, the temples, the theater, all quiet, all waiting for tomorrow. You take one last deep breath, imagining the streets lit softly by torch and moonlight, and let your mind drift with the city into calmness. The gentle hum of life fades into memory. The stars above Athens shine quietly, companions to the dreams of all who walked these streets before you. Peace settles fully, like warm honey dripping slowly down the spine. Your thoughts, once scattered across temples, workshops, and plazas, soften into one continuous thread of contentment. And now, you let it go. Let the city sleep. Let the night enfold you. Let your mind wander gently. The laughter, the music, the voices, and the steps of Athens merge into a lullaby that carries you softly toward rest. The day is complete. The city is quiet. You are ready. Feel the tension of your day dissolve as your mind settles into the soft rhythm of Athens at night. The stones underfoot, once warm in the sunlight, are now cool and steady. Each breath you take echoes the slow exhalation of the city itself. You hear distant murmurs, maybe the faint stir of a late traveler, the whisper of an olive branch in the night wind, or a lone lyre's gentle chord fading into darkness. Let your imagination drift through these quiet sounds, imagining the city's heart beating softly beneath the star-lit sky. Notice how each step you once took, the marketplace, the sacred way, the theater, the fountains, folds inward like the gentle closing of a book. Each memory blends seamlessly into the next, a continuous flow of calm. The faces, the voices, the small joys, and the quiet devotion are all tucked safely into this evening, leaving you a sense of belonging and ease. Your body relaxes further. Muscles that carried the day's walks ease their grip, shoulders drop, fingers uncurl. You imagine the last golden light of sunset spilling over the rooftops, seeping gently into your chest and mind. Every inhale brings calm. Every exhale releases the city's gentle lull. And as your mind floats along this river of memory and imagery, imagine yourself settling comfortably under a tree in the Agora, or beside the fountain, the cat at your feet, the night cool and infinite. You are safe. You are content. You are part of a city that has lived for centuries, breathing softly with you as you drift towards sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.